listening to the Decarbonisation Dialogue, a podcast from Salix.
Welcome to the Decarbonisation Dialogue. I am Hannah Walker, and I believe that the best way to communicate a message is by being passionate about what you are talking about. Today, I have Vince Glover as my guest. Welcome to Vince. As Group Director of Strategic Projects at New City College in East London, Vince is committed to embedding sustainability at the heart of the college's growth and development. It's his job to ensure that all strategic projects and initiatives, whether related to infrastructure, digital transformation or curriculum innovation, prioritise environmental and societal responsibility. Colleges and universities play a crucial role in the net zero discussion. Though their importance can vary depending on context, policy, research and other influences. So let's get on and talk to Vince about his role with the college and how it keeps sustainability at its heart. Welcome, Vince.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me along to talk about sustainability today. Really pleased to be here.
Thank you. Now, Vince, let's start by talking about your own career, because you've had a career in education and now you're working largely on climate issues. How's your perspective on climate change evolved over this time as well?
So I've been in the education, skills, vocational training sector for far too long, for close to 25 years now. So quite a long period of time, actually, and that's within independent training providers, FE colleges, universities, sector skills councils, all different types of organisations, really. And actually, one thing I've seen over that period of time is definitely increased awareness about climate issues, but also the thing you said at the top, actually, around impact, influence, making a difference, making a change, and actually organisations becoming so much more aware and wanted to be at the heart, really, of that positive change and really making a difference. So I've definitely seen that change in the last quarter of a century in the education sector. So sustainability really becoming much more a strategic focus for organisations like ourselves at New City College Group, and people individually and collectively really wanting to make a difference. So that's definitely changed from when I started my career back in the early 2000s. And I think that's all gone in the right direction. But we're definitely conscious, and a lot of providers are conscious. There's so much more to do, really, around affecting positive impact and change within the education sector.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that you've been able to tap into one of the funding programs that we deliver, which is the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme, which is all about replacing the fossil fuels heating systems with heat pumps and all of those kind of energy efficiency measures. Can you tell us a little bit about the various campuses that you've got and what kind of projects you've seen in terms of the big kind of renewable and sustainable work that's been going on at the college over the last few years?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I should say, just to set the context, in terms of us as a college group, and so New City College Group actually is a fast-growing, ever-expanding, ever-evolving, complex organisation. And it started as a relatively small college, actually, going back to 2015-16, and has actually grown exponentially over the last decade to become a huge college group, one of the largest college groups in the UK, in fact, and now has 11 campuses, so that they stretch across great swathes of East London out into Essex. And so the campus and the college estate actually have become ever more complex over that period of time. And so from a very small beginning has become quite a huge organisation in terms of square meterage of campus space and all the associated impacts on emissions and really the need for carbon reduction as part of that expansion. And so that's the context of the group, really. A big beast, close to 20,000 students every year in terms of our communities that we serve, over 2,000 staff. And so you can see the size of the organisation now and the imperative, as you say, to make sure we're focused on reducing emissions, carbon reduction, thinking about the environment as we grow and expand as an organisation. So absolutely, we've tapped into the public sector decarbonisation scheme from Salix, and we've now just completed our second project, actually, on our second campus. So we started in 2024 by removing all of our end-of-life gas boilers in our Redbridge campus in Essex, and then moved on last year to do a similar project at Epping. And so that was our second campus, and we've seen really significant reductions in gas consumption, over 90% reduction in gas consumption on both of those campuses, and obviously the associated reduction in carbon emissions, which has been fantastic. And so both of those projects were focused on removing gas boilers and replacing them with state-of-the-art air source heat pumps, which are obviously much more energy efficient, much better for the environment, and have really had that fantastic positive impact on the overall reduction of our emissions across those two campuses. And then we're planning a third. And so we've got a third part of the funding scenario to go at Ardley Green out in Havering. And so that's the third part of our plan to further reduce our emissions across those key large college campuses. And so we've been quite focused with our contractor partners at each stage of the scheme on the best possible solutions, the most energy efficient solutions, and also the most effective solutions for the long term. So actually our focus definitely is not on how do we just deliver funding, how do we do the short term need scenario. We really are focused on something that's going to last and be impactful for our students, our staff, our communities, really for the much longer term. So sustainable solutions really at the heart of our focus on those campuses and that particular piece of funding. So it's gone well. It's gone really well actually in terms of the reductions, but also I think in terms of the comfort levels within the environments in our campuses, and that's also quite key for us. That actually, students are at the heart of our business, of what we do. That's our mission really, to serve them and to make sure we're providing first class, high quality learning environments in which students can learn, study, and achieve their qualifications. So really important in terms of the environment, but also in terms of our end users.
And
so,
it's a huge real estate, as you say, various campuses and 20,000 students. And you have a responsibility there, obviously, to educate. But obviously, you've also got this interest in training and green skilling, upskilling and green skills for that generation and for those students. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how you're looking to train the workforce? Because there are various figures around. I think I read somewhere that for London alone, to reach net zero by 2030, we need to improve skills. And apparently we've got about 4,000 people working in retrofit in London at the moment, but we need about 60,000. So you've got 20,000 students there at your college. What are you doing to get these people skilled up to take the jobs for the future, but also to ensure that we can get those energy efficiency measures installed?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Hannah. I think we've all seen as the demand has increased and is increasing all the time, really, for those types of skills. I think those skills gaps become even more in focus, really, in terms of how are we going to fill those gaps with the workforce of the future. And it's not even the future; it's the workforce of the here and now in terms of the demand for some of these low carbon solutions. So we've been really focused on thinking about the next generation of learning and skills and the types of facilities that we need as an organisation to make sure we're filling those skills gaps with the right types of individuals, completely competent, fully competent, with all the skills and knowledge that they need. And part of that has been investment in our college campuses. We've invested in low carbon skills labs. We've worked carefully with manufacturers and employers to make sure we've got cutting edge facilities, equipment, all the latest equipment as it advances, month by month really now in terms of the latest technology, to make sure we're training the workforce of the future with the right types of skills and the right type of equipment. So across our campus estate now, we've got those low carbon labs. And also critically, as part of that mix, making sure we're providing the right level of CPD to staff. So actually we are then equipping those individual students with the right types of skills, with the right kinds of skill sets from people that actually have the very latest knowledge and can deliver that knowledge to them. So partly building those labs, but also making sure that our own training resources fully upskilled to make sure we're meeting the needs of all the different low carbon sectors. So there's a huge piece of work. We were fortunate enough to be recognised as a Green Gown Award winner last year. within the next generation learning and skills category. So fantastic to get recognition as a further education college for all that fantastic work that goes into developing those low carbon skills courses and then delivering them, and then working with employers to make sure we're getting people into employment at the right time with the right skills. So yeah, we see ourselves very much at the forefront of the low carbon skills revolution. But again, we know back to the demand piece and the data, we know there's a huge set of skills gaps still to be filled. And so it's definitely an evolving picture. I mean, making sure we're filling those gaps as best we can.
Now, what does, for someone who's not a scientist, and I'm not a student, unfortunately, but what does a renewable or low carbon skills lab look like? What is that? Can you explain that? You've mentioned it a couple of times. What and who can access that? What qualifications do you need? What will you be doing in there? What will the students be doing in there?
So they'll be doing a range, and they do a range of different things actually within those labs. And so it kind of depends on the subsector involved. So for existing electricians, for example, we then upskill people with level 3 electrical qualifications with the right competencies as a starting point to make sure they're fully competent as electricians, with the bolt-on units for things like solar PV. So they'll work on solar panels actually in situ within those labs and outside those labs to see how all the component parts fit together. So again, it does depend on the occupation levels of each of these different kind of skill sets. So that's for electricians. For plumbers, we have a similar thing around solar thermal panels and heat pumps, and how that technology has advanced and how that fits together with existing systems domestically and commercially. And so again, there's a range of equipment, as I say, that we've developed in conjunction with the latest manufacturing techniques and advances in that technology to make sure it's all up to date. And again, very often you will see in training centres equipment that's sat there for a long time. One thing we know for sure is that actually you need the latest equipment so that actually when people are upskilled, they can go and talk to customers, go and talk to communities with the very latest information on the latest technology. So it is very hands-on. It's not a theoretical set of courses that actually you come and sit in a classroom and you learn about the theory. It is all about the hands-on installation, maintenance, control, updates to all the latest technology and equipment. So it is quite high-tech, actually. I was surprised when I first stepped into a lab to see just how much there was in there and how much there was to play with. And I say play with, but obviously it's all about making sure people are competent and skilled with these bits of equipment, which is really important. And so hopefully they leave our New City College Eco Labs with all of that requisite knowledge, skills, experience, competence to then go out into the outside world and then install and maintain those systems effectively for customers. So yeah, a huge amount of work. One other thing I would also say, we're also thinking about developing new courses. A good example of that most recently was drone technology. So thinking about drone technology for construction sites. And thermal imaging and how all that fits together in terms of not just the nuts and bolts of fitting equipment, but actually the assessment of the thermal nature of buildings domestically and commercially, and making sure people are thinking about getting drones into the air. Are they competent to use those drones? Again, it's very hands-on. It's not a theoretical piece of work. It's training that gets you really to the heart of those low-carbon solutions. So, yeah, really exciting to see it in action, actually.
Sounds incredible for the students. And they come from far afield, do they, to New City? Do they come from all over London or all over the country? Or is it East London? Which area, geographical area?
Now we've got just so many campuses. Our geographical areas is just expanding all the time. So actually we get people coming from obviously huge parts of East London, North London, parts of Essex. But also think critically now, because we've developed courses that are quite niche and quite unique. I think we are the only ones, or definitely the first, for the drone course. So we get people travelling, some distance to come and join our courses because they are in high demand, but actually the supply of them isn't quite where it is at the moment, where it needs to be. So yeah, we are quite specialists in some of those areas, and people do travel, and they want obviously the very latest skills to equip themselves with. So,
that is fascinating. A drone course on how to use drones, but very practical. It sounds incredible, but very practical. And in terms of employers, because you've touched upon how important it is, you're training these future skills, these really important green skills, building relationships with employers from around the region. But how do you think governments business, education, and all of us can work more collaboratively on climate. But already you're talking about how you're working with business, but where does everybody else come into that?
One thing definitely always in our minds is how we connect the dots of the different systems involved in the education and skills landscape. And obviously part of that is thinking about government policy. Some of that is, for us, very local policy. So we work closely with the GLA on various different committees and groups and steering groups, including with employers, to define what those skills need to be and then deliver them. But also I think that interconnectivity between government and policy, employers, and then us as the organisations that deliver those skills is ever more critical. And I think we've seen, and I've definitely seen over a long period of time, how a non-joined up approach very quickly leads to failure. So actually the investment that everyone wants to see in skills, for example, actually leads down a bit of a cul-de-sac because it doesn't then lead to gainful employment for those individuals. And so actually, if you don't have employers in the mix with providers like ourselves, aligned to a coherent policy that joins up all the different parts of all the different systems that very often don't work together, we try and do our bit to connect those really. So we make sure employers and employer committees are at the heart of what we do, so they shape our provision rather than us impose on employers and economies, the things that we think they want to see. And so we are very close to all of the local and national policies around sustainability, around skills, and we work very closely with employers to also help them navigate, I think, what those policies mean and how they can make a real difference to the productivity and the outputs for their particular businesses. That's really critical.
And how about your local community? Because, as you say, you've got campuses in various areas spread quite far afield, and so they'll all have their own specific kind of community identities, if you like. Is there any joining up with? We know your students are passionate. We've got 20,000 students. I think you said you had about 2,000 staff. Is there any joining up with any of those kind of climate community and local environment action groups?
One thing we wanted to do with our initial 5-year environmental strategy, which started in 2021, was do that very thing, knowing that actually we had quite a large set of those community organisations and steering groups and working committees all working together, but very often working in their own silos, sub-regionally very often, and how could we bring those together? So we work carefully with climate groups in Tower Hamlets, for example. We do a similar thing with Hackney Borough Council, and very often we will pull those organisations together and think about how we can join those dots together to make sure we've got a wider focus on positive impact, not just in a small area of London, but how we can share best practice and pull that together. A lot of that work is done via the GLA Climate Leadership Group, of which we're a prominent member, and thinking just about the different London boroughs that we serve, what works well in each of those boroughs, and how can we mainstream that really good positive practice across the other parts of the geography in which we serve our communities, really. And that is critical. The other thing we really try to do is make sure we enable and empower those communities themselves to take action. So actually, we focus on skills and training and vocational pathways into some of these skills, but actually that community action is just so critical, particularly around employment, particularly around local impact. And so we do a huge amount of work putting those groups together and thinking carefully about the right types of action.
So it's very dynamic, isn't it? And very much a kind of moving feast as well, of a lot of action taking part and collaboration. How do you're obviously very positive, and you've got to be, because you've got a lot of work to be done, but how do you maintain that kind of motivation when we're looking at the big stories that we're looking at around climate on our news every day?
Yeah, I think it's really easy to get bogged down with the negativity, I think, just generally of the news, let alone sustainability news and policy. But actually, I think maintaining that positive focus is just so important. And as an organisation, as individuals within an organisation, we are really focused on momentum, positivity, celebrating the wins. I think the other thing that really helps us is actually our students, our students themselves, and seeing them in action. And so over the last few years, we've really tried to foster that environment of student-led action. So actually, this is not something that we impose from our governance and SMT down onto students. This is led by the students themselves. And so if you ever need any positivity or, the feel-good factor, I would encourage you to come along to our annual NCC Goes Green week, which actually in the year just gone became a fortnight, came 2 weeks. There's just so much that students wanted to do and get involved with. We had to expand it. And within those few weeks, the positivity from students themselves around wanting to make a difference, wanting to raise awareness, get more people involved, finding the advocates for change, being the advocates for change. That level of positivity, I think, helps.
It drives you on. It moves you forward, doesn't it? It's the great motivator. That Goes Green Week sounds fantastic. Okay, so bearing in mind what you've said about the students, who are highly motivating, and you're always very much aware of them because they are the future. And it's a big question, Vince, but I know that you're used to big projects and big questions. So if you could implement one change globally on climate tomorrow, what would it be?
That is a big question, isn't it? My goodness. And only one. There's probably a whole long list of things, but probably close to the top, if not at the top of the list, would be obviously thinking about the power of education. And you'd expect me to say that, wouldn't you? Being an educator, being part of the education system for so long, being part of a fantastic positive college group. Education is key, I think. And so for me, the biggest action would be around properly embedding, integrating sustainability education in all levels of curricula, and that's all the way from early years. And I've got children, and I've seen them go through the education system and what they learn and how they learn. From a very young age, I think that raising awareness of environmental impact, positive and negative, and just building that level of education from a young age all the way through primary school into secondary school to university and beyond as adult learners, all the way through our lives as being as students and learners. I think making sure that's properly embedded within our education structure for me is the big thing. And I think that's nationally, that's locally, that's globally, that's at all levels. I just think that power of education is so important, and it's easily said, but much harder, I think, to do and enact. I think it's a very easy thing to say we want to embed things. And again, I go into colleges and schools and other educators, and everyone likes to talk about we embed things. We start to we talk about these things in the classroom, but actually, I think it really needs a coherent, structured, sustained approach. And that's top down and bottom up, I think, at all levels of our education system. And for me, that's the big thing. That's the thing that drives us all.
So education at the core. Final question for you, and I have to ask it. It's not such a big question, but it holds you to account a little bit, because we're talking about climate, we're talking about sustainability. Now let's just turn it on you for a moment. Do you think you lead a sustainable lifestyle when you leave the college and you go home? What are your kind of green or sustainable habits?
I do my best. I hopefully do my bit. But again, being involved in sustainability education more closely the last few years has obviously, changed my perspective on things. And so I do what I can when I can. And so I think carefully about waste, in particular at home, in the house, thinking about recycling, what needs to go where and when. I've also I've tried to put my money where my mouth is very often, thinking about investing in new technologies. So actually we now have solar panels and a battery here at home, in terms of harnessing the power of the sun, thinking about solar PV and how that supports, reduced consumption and feeding that back into the grid, etc. And so, trying to do as much as I can really in the home environment as well as the work environment. And so there's more to do, there's more I can do, there's more I want to do. It's finding the time and the money. And I've got the inclination. It's just finding those things, I think, to do.
Super. Thank you very much to Vincent. Fascinating to hear about the drones, and obviously as well as the initiatives being run by the students there, and your work with Hackney and Tower Hamlets and the communities for which you serve. So superb. Thank you very much to Vince Glover from New City College. There can be no doubt that climate change is the biggest challenge of our time. Today, we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions to slow global warming. Today, we must act for tomorrow, adjusting our lifestyles to current and future impacts of climate change. Today, we must use our collective wisdom to deliver on our climate commitments. Today, we work for tomorrow's world. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast channels, and please email us with your news and views at podcast@salixfinance.co.uk. Big thanks again to Vince.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for having me. Thanks a lot.
You've been listening to the Decarbonisation Dialogue, a podcast from Salix. For more information about our work and to find more content, please visit salixfinance.co.uk/podcasts.